What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron. We just had a great week 4 of the fantasy football season wrap up yesterday on Sunday. It is Monday today, so that means we're going to hop on here, give you guys my top 10 lessons learned, takeaways, observations, whatever you would like to call them for the week that we just saw in fantasy land, in fantasy football world. Now, before we get into that, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty bag.
All right, so if you're new to the channel, how this works is I look at the screen, look at my notes, and I just kind of talk about, from the games that happened yesterday, my top 10 lessons learned, observations, all that. And the first one is Cordarelle Patterson is the best player in the NFL. And obviously, I'm joking when I say that. But the guy is literally the RB2 on the season. He has 24.9 points per game in PPR. And I just don't really know what's going on here. The guy was a first-round bust out of Texas. I remember him being, this kind of Percy Harvin type gadget guy. And the last 4 seasons, he's operated as a gadget player who returned kicks. And now he comes out here in 2021 and goes crazy. And I have no idea how to feel about him. He is going crazy. As a quarterback, running back, wide receiver hybrid, he came out yesterday, had 6 carries, 34 yards, 5 catches, 82 yards, 3 touchdowns. Just weird stat lines he keeps putting up. Almost like this is almost my dream for Laviska Shenault. Like if Laviska Shenault could do this every season, what Cordarelle Patterson is doing, that'd kind of be not best case scenario, but it'd be nice. Now the problem is that he's doing this in a really weird way. Like there's nothing else I can use words for besides say that it's weird. He's lining up at quarterback, running back, wide receiver. He's not getting a ton of volume. He's being really efficient, but he looks good. Like the touchdown catch that he had was a great catch. I'm not sure Calvin Ridley comes down with that, where he kind of mosses the guy in the corner of the end zone. Now obviously he had 3 touchdown catches, but that was one of them. Yet he saw his lowest running back rush share, which means that he didn't get a ton of attempts. Wayne Gallman mixed back in. So this takeaway is honestly more so Cordarelle Patterson is extremely confusing. Like it's fun to watch. The whole thing has been fun. I honestly don't know how to feel about it though. RB2 on the season though. So he's been great. If you have him and you picked him up off waivers, he's been a great plug and play. I don't know rest of season what Cordarelle Patterson looks like. I don't know. I can't think of somebody that has done this in the past. Every week it feels like, it was just a fever dream where he went off and there's no way you can start him this week, and then he comes out here and does it again. Now, our second takeaway from the week is my take last week was you remove CMC, you remove Dan Arnold, and that equals Terrace Marshall breakout season. Not so much. It did not equal Terrace Marshall breakout season. So with Christian McCaffrey out, with Dan Arnold out, freeing up targets, I thought it'd be okay. Those targets will go to Terrace Marshall. Terrace Marshall has an ADOT of 6 yards, and CMC and Dan Arnold both operate in that area of the field. So it would make sense for him to soak up those targets, but instead, those targets went to Robbie Anderson because Robbie Anderson had a 15.7% target share on the season. Then he had a 28.2% target share yesterday. So jacked it way up. Then we had Terrace Marshall, who had a 12.1% target share on the season, only have 7.7% of the targets yesterday. I can't explain why his targets went down, but learning experience for me is the vacated targets that, vacated, you can kind of make the case that vacated targets aren't even real. If the players aren't there, they're not going to demand the targets. But when you have, McCaffrey and Arnold gone, and no matter where their ADOTs are, most of those targets probably go to the next best player, not the player that gets targeted in that range of the field, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So instead of those targets going to Terrace Marshall, who's in that quadrant of the field, probably goes to Robbie Anderson, who's that next guy up after DJ Moore. I don't know. I think that made sense. Now, we've seen Robbie Anderson's ADOT go from, it was like 15-ish yards on the season, came all the way back down to 12 yesterday, which means that Robbie Anderson kind of operated as more of a, all-purpose wide receiver in Christian McCaffrey's absence. So as long as McCaffrey is gone, I think it's safe to say that Robbie Anderson gets a little bit of a boost from that. Which then brings us to number 3, which is Diontae Johnson is the only wide receiver I'm interested in at this point. He's the wide receiver 8 in points per game in PPR leagues. He's gotten a minimum of 20% target share on the season. He's had at least 10 targets in every game this year. And he just put up 24 points in PPR, 13 targets, 9 catches, 92 yards, a touchdown. And he plays in this perfect role where he is going to be extremely fantasy relevant on this team no matter how much Big Ben is going to hold this entire offense back, because his ADOT is perfect. It's an 8.8 average depth of target, which means he's in Ben Roethlisberger's wheelhouse. Roethlisberger's not going to air it downfield. He's going to get it right around the sticks where Diontae Johnson hangs out, and he commands a lot of them. He commands a lot of targets. On the flip side, you have a guy like Juju who has a low ADOT, 4.4 yards is his average depth of target. So that's when every single one of your catches are only 4.4 yards downfield, you need a lot of yak to make up for that on the efficiency end of things, and he doesn't command enough targets to kind of overcome the lack of efficiency with the volume. Then we have Claypool, who I think is an amazing wide receiver, but Ben just can't connect with him that far downfield. Claypool is a deep threat. He's kind of like a DK Metcalf kind of guy. So as long as Big Ben is there and struggling, Diontae Johnson's a locked and loaded top 15 wide receiver, and Claypool and Juju are, kind of boom bust wide receiver 3s at best, and it pains me to say that. But Diontae Johnson's skill set just fits so well with what Ben is doing right now that he's the only wide receiver that really makes sense there. Now, going off of that, going from one quarterback that is on the edge of his prime to the one that is just, leaning into it for the first time, we have Jalen Hurts. My note is Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback rest of season. And the fades on Jalen Hurts this season, if you were one of the people that were fading Jalen Hurts, I'm gonna need you to say cheese real quick so we can catch you in 4K, because it made no sense. He averaged 20 points per game as a rookie. We got a discount on a rushing quarterback due to uncertainty with his arm and Deshaun Watson maybe coming in, which was the funniest thing ever. If you want to fade him in Dynasty because, Deshaun Watson, his future's in jeopardy, whatever, but there was never a case where Jalen Hurts wasn't going to play 17 games this season. If they bring in Deshaun Watson, they're not just going to say, oh yeah, Deshaun Watson, you have 29 women that think that you took advantage of them. Come on the field and play for our organization. That was never going to happen. He was always going to play 17 games, and when you're in a redraft league, that is all that mattered. The discount you got on his price because of that uncertainty was crazy, and we buy that. That's like the whole idea of a Konami code QB you can find at the back end of drafts. It felt a lot like Lamar Jackson the year that he broke out, and Hurts has done nothing but prove that. He had 387 yards yesterday, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 8 carries, and 47 yards against the Chiefs. Put up 28 fantasy points. He also had numerous touchdown passes dropped. He looked great yesterday. And he is now one of 5 quarterbacks. I don't know why I've had this graphic up the entire time, but he's now one of 5 quarterbacks to ever crack 180 points in his first 8 career starts. He's up there with Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton, Justin Herbert. That's what this graphic is. And he's now the quarterback 3 on the season. Like I said, he's a top 5 quarterback moving forward. Jalen Hurts is, a real life. He is at the very least a cheat code for fantasy football. And in my opinion, he's kind of good at real life football. And another quarterback that I was actually pretty low on heading in, or I was actually pretty high on in terms of football, like fantasy football, but in terms of like real life football, I wasn't high on this guy at all. And it's Daniel Jones. I want to say Daniel Jones might be really good at football. I was really impressed. I was watching with one of my buddies Thursday night game week 2, which was Washington versus the Giants. I thought he had a great day that day. Daniel Jones looked really good. And Daniel Jones, okay, last year he didn't look great. He only threw like 14 touchdowns, something really bad. But you have to remember, I want to say most of his main receivers were hurt that year. Saquon was hurt. He wasn't working with a ton. Jason Garrett at OC, but he had a great day yesterday as well. On top of that Thursday night game. Yesterday, he was out there throwing to John Ross and Kadarius Toney as like every down wide receivers, and he went out there and threw for 400 yards against the 6th best pass DVOA defense in New Orleans. He finished as the quarterback 6 on the day. Like it's crazy what he's doing. He looked really good. Like that's a great performance. I thought he looked great, threw the ball well, was making good decisions. And then he also kind of unlocked Kadarius Toney a little bit. Like a little bit of a side note I wanted to bring up here is Kadarius Toney looked pretty good. He had a 25% target share, which is like huge for a wide receiver or rookie wide receiver. Even like on the season, somebody like I want to say CeeDee Lamb last year had like an 18% target share. So if you can get above a 20% target share as a rookie, now obviously just one game, but it's positive for a guy that has been a no-show the entire season. And he still does have, like Ayuk in his range of outcomes. First round wide receiver, guy that wasn't that good analytically, but can kind of still pop. And going back to Daniel Jones, he's not only the quarterback 6 on the season in fantasy, so he's great in fantasy. But again, I think that he's actually kind of good at real life football. He is bordering on the line of, franchise quarterback level play. He has the second best PFF passing grade. He looked great there. He looked great on the Thursday night game. I think Daniel Jones is actually like a pretty good quarterback in real life. Need a little bit of a water break. I went down the wrong pipe. All right, baby. Here we go. Number 6. Jeez, man. I honestly drank that just to clear up the throat a little bit, but if anything, it closed it. But we're going to talk about CH. And CH, my note here is CH has given me a headache. I feel like I've talked about him in this like every week. This segment I do, the top 10 takeaways, top 10 lessons learned. I feel like I've mentioned him every single week. Last week, he had a near identical stat line to what he had in week 3. So week 4 and week 3, you're looking at 100 yards rushing, a few catches, a touchdown, 15 to 18 points, kind of just what he's been doing recently. And the problem is that should be encouraging, but we have 2 red flags here. One is that his play time is decreasing. He played only 52% of the snaps this week, which is not good when your other running backs are Darrell Williams and Jerick McKinnon. The other problem is he's not getting the valuable touches. He's getting all the between the 20s work, which is not great, and it only is valuable for fantasy when he's scoring these touchdowns and when he's rushing for 100 yards and being extremely efficient on the ground, but he's not getting valuable touches. He only had 2 targets this week, only 1 red zone rush. You want to have those valuable touches. You want to have more red zone rush attempts. You want to have more targets. So what he's doing is decent, but again, I wouldn't get extremely excited about what CEH is doing here because the ceiling isn't really there. It is hard to unlock a ceiling when you're not getting targets and goal line work. Now, with that being said, somebody that is a running back of a similar profile to CEH, he's being used in a different way, is Chase Edmonds. And Chase Edmonds is now the RB10 in PPR, and I'm calling him DeAndre Swift West because just like DeAndre Swift, he's doing weird things. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet. He's only seen a max of 12 carries in a game, but his efficiency in pass catching is what's making him extremely valuable in PPR. Again, like I said, he's the RB10 in PPR, which is huge. He's seen the 3rd highest targets on the season at running back. He has a 21% target share, and he's not getting goal line work. So again, we want those high value touches. We want goal line work. We want targets. If you can't get the goal line work, then get the targets. If you can't get the targets, then get the goal line work. And that's kind of the story with James Conner and Chase Edmonds is one of them does the goal line stuff, one of them does the pass catching. So they're both kind of relevant. But Edmonds is more relevant because he's getting the pass catching work, which is a little bit more voluminous. I don't know. He gets more of them. And then also, he's really good. He rushed for 120 rushing yards yesterday on 10 attempts. So he's efficient. He's getting touches in the valuable spots of the field. So Chase Edmonds, like I said, DeAndre Swift West, he's winning in weird ways in fantasy. Which then brings us to number 8. And it's the rookie quarterbacks looked great this week. They looked great, man. And I think that we probably should have preached this from the beginning that you got to kind of be patient with these rookie quarterbacks. They're not going to come out here and just pop right away. I want to say Drew, so at DF Bean Counter on Twitter brought it up. I don't know if it was in his Twitter or his Discord, but when you look through like the first 3 games of like Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin, Marcus Mariota, other like maybe even like Russell Wilson's, all of them through like 3 weeks, none of them were that good. Their PFF grades weren't that good. They weren't, their stats weren't anything crazy. These guys need time, man. When you come into the NFL, you can't just like come out here and you're just gonna like outside of like the Justin Herberts of the world and like some other guys that are lucky. You're not just gonna come out here and sling it. And on top of that, it's not a huge indicator if you come out here and sling it in like the first 3 games. Like I want to say Bake was really good through his first 3 games, and he's not a world-beating quarterback. So and I want to say Peyton Manning was that way, Andrew Luck was that way. So you got to give these guys a full 16, 17 game sample before we kind of make any conclusions at quarterback because the learning curve is so steep. And when we're talking about the quarterbacks as a whole, as a Jets fan, fellas, I'm so back in on Zach Wilson. I was never that out, but I was discouraged through, he led the league in interceptions. The one against, the Patriots game where he threw 4 picks. And it's just like, here's the thing with Zach Wilson, man, is in that game, he had 4 picks against the Patriots. There was a certain point where I was just like, man, like, how do you keep making these same mistakes, keep throwing into the coverage and like just head scratching interceptions, ones that don't even make sense? Like, how come at a certain point you don't just like, pull it back and maybe just take your check downs and kind of live to see another day? And I'm kind of starting to understand that that's kind of, I kind of like Zach Wilson for that. I like that Zach Wilson he will never do that. He will never just, take his check downs and play a very conservative game. And I kind of prefer that out of a quarterback. I want a guy that is going to take the risk, make the big throws, put it all out there. And if he can kind of work through things and get the interceptions out of the way, and he'll kind of learn along the way to make the more smart throws. But, the kind of throws that he was making yesterday where just bombing it. He was in the pocket. Offensive lineman gets pushed back literally in his face, and he throws it on like a corner route to like Keelan Cole, drops it right in the bread basket. There's a bunch of plays yesterday where Zach Wilson made throws that a lot of NFL QBs can't make, rolling out, waving his guy downfield and just putting it out there. Like I love what I saw, to be honest. He comes out there, wins in a tough overtime game. Now, to be honest with you guys, as a Jets fan, I don't really even want to be winning games because I'd rather just go out there. I want to get Thibodeau or Derek Stingley. But at the same time, I just want to see Zach Wilson get some confidence under his belt, get some wins under his belt, get some development, some good games under his belt. So I'll take that. Then we had Fields and Lance. They played pretty well. It wasn't a great day for fantasy in terms of Fields, but he had 209 yards, 64.7% completion percentage is pretty encouraging. And he graded out as the 11th best passer this week in PFF, despite having, a little bit of a worse stat line than a Zach Wilson. But he had the best passing grade among rookies. Then you had Trey Lance, who came in at half, scored like 2 touchdowns, put up 20 points in fantasy, despite not playing the full game. He looked pretty good. Apparently, he's going to be playing for the next, couple weeks while Jimmy Garoppolo is out, so that's exciting. Then you had Mac Jones last night go toe-to-toe with Tom Brady. Now, hand up, I did fall asleep at like half of that game. I thought that game was going to be amazing, but Mans was tired, and the game was a literal, just a rock fight, I guess is what you would call it. Then I liked what Trevor Lawrence did on Thursday night too against the Bengals, where I really liked the way they were using him in the read option. He was getting slippery. He had that rushing touchdown. So all the rookie quarterbacks are starting to look up a little bit here. Let's just be patient. I'm excited. I still think that this is one of the best quarterback classes we've ever seen. When you think about, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen from that quarterback class, who else was in there? So you had like Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, but like Baker, Lamar, Josh Allen. For Josh Allen and Lamar, it took them we didn't know that they were going to be special until like Lamar, and he didn't even start over Joe Flacco for like half the season. And then Josh Allen, we didn't know he was going to be special until like 2 or 3 years later. So just give these quarterbacks need time. And I've seen with Josh Allen now, I'm now convinced that with quarterbacks, like no matter what you felt about them pre-draft, like in the analytics or anything like that, their draft profiles are so hit or miss that it's hard to have any kind of definitive answers. This quarterback is going to be good, isn't going to be good. So you just have to kind of give them their space, their time, and they'll kind of, work those things out. Now, with our number 9 takeaway, I wrote down Latavious Murray, Ravens RB1. Now, do I think that that's going to be the case the entire season? Probably not, but he saw 62% of the snaps, 75% of the opportunities, so the targets and the carries. And what was weird is that Tyson Williams was a healthy scratch after having, I want to say, over a 5 yard per carry on the season. I mean, he looked pretty good this season, but they sat him. Murray was in there, Le'Veon Bell was in there, Devonta Freeman was in there, just an absolute dream team if it was like 2016. Now, like I said, I'm not sure that this sustains over the entire season, but it's worth noting, and I do think that Murray is probably going to be the 1A moving forward, not the bell cow, but just, the guy at the top of the committee. Now, I do expect Tyson to not be a healthy scratch next week. I don't think that whatever they saw from Le'Veon Bell probably wasn't that great. I think that they probably move forward with Tyson Williams, Latavious Murray, and then probably healthy scratch Bell or Freeman moving forward, but we'll kind of see. Just kind of keep tabs on that. But I will say Latavious Murray moving forward is probably the guy to own in Baltimore. And our last takeaway of the day is Van Jefferson is producing against all odds, fellas, and it's insanely annoying. It's insanely annoying because for a few reasons. And one is obviously he's taken away from Robert Woods. Robert Woods, is out here with 11.5 points per game, yet Van Jefferson has more points per game than him with 11.9 points per game. He has a 13.4% target share, which is crazy. It's insane because I cannot stress this enough. He is one of the worst prospects I've ever seen, Van Jefferson. Now, before I get into his prospect profile, with Robert Woods, his bull case for producing and being like a wide receiver 2 is that there wasn't a third option. There wasn't going to be somebody that takes out 13.4% of the pie. That's a little bit concerning for him. I'm still pretty bullish on Robert Woods rest of season. I still do think that he's going to finish inside the top 24 wide receivers. Van Jefferson makes this a little bit tricky, and like I said, one of the worst prospects I've ever seen. He was a 24-year-old rookie. Those guys are rarely producers. He didn't break out until his 22-year-old season. So he is, grown man age producing in college. He was a 22-year-old junior, a 23-year-old senior. So it's hard for me when you're out there as 22 years old or 23-year-old, like dominating against the competition. It's not a huge indicator for me, especially in Van Jefferson's case as a 23-year-old senior. He is older than most of the competition. His best ever college stat line was in that season when he had 49 catches for 657 yards and 6 touchdowns. Insane. Like, that's not even a pretty stat line. On Florida, that passes the ball a good amount. It's not like it's Army or Navy or something like that. And he also sucked last year. He was a bad rookie. He was a bad prospect profile, and then he was a bad rookie. So he face planted. Usually these guys don't amount to anything in the NFL. He had 12 targets, 7 catches, 136 yards, and a touchdown last season. Only suited up for 3 games. He was a healthy scratch most of the time behind guys like Josh Reynolds. And it's just wild. I wouldn't roster him because I don't really see the upside there, but he's enough to kind of screw with Robert Woods' upside moving forward, which is worth noting. Now, that's going to do it for us today. Another great week of fantasy football just wrapped up. We are going to, as soon as this video is done recording, I'm going to write up the waiver wire video, get that out. You guys will have the waiver wire targets tomorrow. Time to get going for this week. Now, we have the Monday Night Football game on tonight. So I want to say, make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy. I have the link in the description down below in the description, where if you want to, mess around on some pick'ems, on some, over-unders, fantasy points, passing yards, rushing yards, all that good stuff for the Monday night game tonight. What's it? Chargers versus Raiders. Make sure you hop on Underdog Fantasy. When you deposit $10 or more, you get a $10 bonus when you use promo code RON. And that's going to do it for us today, fellas. As always, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. We're going to be coming out with daily content from now through week 17 of your championships. As always, I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.